right. Well, I think we will go ahead and get started. We may have other participants joining us shortly. I know sometimes people have to get off desk and those kinds of things, but welcome to our latest mental health and wellness panel, supporting mental health and well-being for LIS students, navigating the challenges of graduate studies. My name is Christine Krieger, and I am the professional development consultant for the Colorado State Library, and I'm going to be your tech support for this session, as well as helping to monitor the chat as we move through. This session is being recorded. You should be able to turn captions on as needed. We will also have the session human captioned after we get the recording, and I hope to send the recording out by tomorrow to everybody who signed up. Feel free to leave your cameras on or off as you feel comfortable. We are going to ask that you stay muted during the open Q&A portion. But there will be lots of time for you to ask your own questions, and feel free to ask them during chat as we go through as well. So with that, it is my pleasure to turn the session over to Phoebe, who is going to provide a few more housekeeping details and introduce the panel.
Yes, so before we begin today's session, I just wanted to acknowledge that the content that we're going to be covering today is pretty heavy and potentially depressing given the topics. Today we're going to be discussing job satisfaction, low morale, constructive criticism of the profession, negative workplace culture, and of course, mental health. So please feel free to take a moment of self-care if needed. We are recording the session, so if it gets to be too much for you, you can always look at the recording later if you need to. The final thought I want to leave you with is that everyone can make a difference. Each of you showed up because you care about our coworkers, our patrons, and our communities. We are happy to see you here. I am moderating the panel today, and I am joined by these fabulous panelists. So I'm going to start with introducing myself. Hi, I'm Phoebe. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a library technician that focuses on e-resource purchasing at the University of Denver. I'm excited to hear what our fabulous panelists have to say today. So first, I will have each of them introducing themselves. I'm going to start off with Kate.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kate Johnson. I use she, her pronouns. I am the art librarian for the city of Dallas, which is very cool. I'm super excited to talk about this. I recently got my MLIS in June of last year. So this is a topic that is very fresh in my mind.
Perfect. Next, I'll have Jackie introduce them.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jackie. I also use she, her pronouns. I'm a collection development librarian at the Auraria Library in Denver. I also graduated last year in August, and so this is still sort of near and dear to my heart because last year was very difficult. So I'm glad to be talking about this with everyone.
Perfect. Next up, I'll have Josh.
Hi, I'm Josh Harrington, he, him pronouns. I'm the business research and instruction librarian at CU Boulder. I started there last year and I graduated from my MLS program last year as well. And yeah, I'm here to talk about the mental health of working and going to school, and I worked a lot while going to school. So yeah, definitely have a lot of experience with that.
Thank you so much, Josh. And next up, I'll have Laurel.
Howdy, I'm Laurel. I use she, her pronouns. I am the creative technology specialist at the Auraria Library, which is to say that I mostly work in makerspaces. I wanted to be on this panel because one, I graduated pretty recently in November, but I also worked full time during all of that. So I know that's a unique challenge. So feel free to ask any questions about that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Laurel. And last but definitely not least, Martine.
Yes, hi, I'm Martin Martinez. I am the Public Services Specialist at Auraria Library. I mainly work at the circulation desk as a student supervisor. I got my MLIS last year as well, in May. And so it's still, yeah, fresh on my mind as well. And then also, yeah, during that time, I was working full time and also just balancing life, work, and yeah, in my professional duties as well. So yeah, it's a pleasure to meet everyone.
Wonderful. I'm so glad we could all be here today to talk about library student mental health. For the format of this session, we will be doing 8 pre-selected questions, and then we will be going into an open question and answer time. Feel free to add any questions you may have to the chat box throughout the session and presentations, and Christine will gather them, and that way we can all discuss them at the end. With that, I'm going to have us start with our fabulous very first question, which is, how do the academic demands of a master's program in library and information science impact students' mental health? Kate, did you want to start us off with this one?
Yeah, I can start off. So when I was doing my program, I was doing a full course load on top of juggling many different jobs. And I found that oftentimes it felt like I was having to prioritize school or work or essays or whatever over my well-being, like sacrificing walk time and friend time all to finish up certain projects. Well, you know, for me, it was a little bit harder too because I have dyslexia, and so I would get certain readings and be just like totally stumped by the font size and unable to read things. And so that didn't happen that often, but when it did, it really made me feel like I had to work a lot harder and therefore put other things again aside because I was dealing with something I can't really change about myself while trying to get a master's program, while also trying to like afford rent and free time. So I think the hardest part about going through this program is learning how to balance all these different aspects of life that happen at the same time. That's all.
Yeah, and I would like to add as well to the academic demands is yes, I agree with Kate. Like, the heavy workload of coursework, trying to balance with projects and then also with professional work and also with family and even time for yourself. That was a struggle for me. Just trying to find time just to cool off because sometimes you'll be reading like, a huge chapter or you're writing a paper and you just want to calm down after work. And so what happened with me is that in my experience, I had to stay up late. And so just to study after work. And so that affected me because after I'm, done studying and it's late at night, I just want to cool off, I just want to, so I stood up late. So I did over my, the last 2 years of getting my master's, I developed insomnia, and so that's it was hard, and I'm still trying to work with that now. But yeah, it's just that with that heavy workload, with the stress, with the anxiety, it just contributes to that. And so, but that's my experience. Yeah.
Thank you both so much for sharing about that. Yeah, definitely. There seems like there's a lot of different impacts, and each of us kind of have gone through something individually that adds upon that. For our next question, what impact does juggling work, internships, and studies have on LIS students' mental health and ability to maintain a healthy work-life balance? So kind of building off that, Laurel, if you wanted.
Yeah. So this was actually my second master's degree, so I was kind of prepared for what the workload was going to be. So like at least I had that going for me. But like I said, I was working full time. I actually changed jobs during the program. I left a job that I'd been at for 7 years, making very little money to move to the Auraria Library. Um, and that change was honestly a really good change because working at a library while going to library school kind of made things click into place a little bit better and made scheduling a little bit easier. Um, but working 8 hours and then going to class, especially our program had a lot of classes that would go from like 7 to 9:30. Those were really rough. I would definitely like get out of class and just like start bawling on my way home because I was just like so tired and overwhelmed. It sucked. Especially in the winter when it was just like dark all the time. It was extra hard. But it can be really, really overwhelming. And then just like finding the time to get everything done. Now that I'm done with my program, I still like will get home sometimes and just like stare at a wall. I feel like I should be doing something else, like homework. There's not homework, so I'm just staring at a wall, trying to figure out what to do with myself. And then the internships add a whole other dimension to that, because if you have a full-time job, you don't have time to do an internship. There's just like, yeah, most places are going to have you work within the Monday through Friday frame. And if that's your work schedule, then that's not going to work for you. I got really lucky in that my boss was really willing to work with me on getting hours in for that. And that my internship was completely online. So I was able to do things over the weekend instead of, in person in an office. But not everyone has that privilege. So it feels like an unwinnable puzzle here where you're trying to figure out how to get all these things to fit together. I don't know, Martine probably has some more to say about that as well.
Yeah. I experienced the same like time management issues, challenges as well. Just trying to, juggle, like I said before, with life, with work, with my studies. And yeah, and it makes you feel left burnt out. You're just burnt out and you're just like, oh, like after a week, and yeah, you just kind of like stare at a wall, like Laurel says. And it's kind of like, yeah, you try to recuperate, you're trying to cope, you're trying to find coping mechanisms, just to help you with that balance, that challenge of time. And sometimes when you do have free time, it's like it's kind of hard to catch up, right? Especially with your personal life. And so yeah, that was the biggest challenge for me, was time management. And then being left burnt out, I had to find other coping mechanisms. And so one of them was eating, right? So I gained a lot of weight as well during my time getting my master's. But that's how I found a way to, like, okay, I got the time managed, but I need to also find a way to make me feel better, since I'm so burnt out, and I just, I got to keep going somehow. And so that's how I used that.
Absolutely. That can be such a tricky balance, honestly, to kind of keep everything afloat. With that in mind, what role does mentorship and faculty support play in promoting the mental health of LIS students? Josh, if you want to give us kind of your insight on this.
Yeah, and I'll add to the like juggling work stuff. I also had 3 jobs while I was going to school, and partly because I pay a lot in rent and like I just needed to afford it. And so like yeah, I think in terms of like supporting mentorship and or like faculty supporting your like work, I didn't really have a lot of time mentally or like space mentally to sort of think about what was next after my program and like what kind of job I would have. Like I had the general sense of like, oh, maybe I wanted to work in an academic library, but I didn't really know what that looked like. And I already was currently working in a public library, so I had a better sense of like what, and I was working in an academic library, but so I had a good sense of like what both environments were like, but like the the role of like your mentors or your faculty like or faculty like support kind of gave me a better idea of like what a career path could look like, what sort of librarian, I could become, and then also like navigating those like job applications. What am I looking for when I'm seeing a job posting? Like that was just kind of a good support system for me mentally because I didn't really know how to navigate that to begin with. And then all the other stuff with work, with school, with my personal life, trying to like balance that. And then also think about like, okay, what's my next career move? Having those, that wasn't really like something I was able to handle without kind of mentors who were able to show me what was available and then also like kind of guide me through, how I want to navigate my next steps.
Yeah, adding on to that, I don't think I would have been motivated enough to start applying for work if I had not been encouraged by my bosses and my coworkers around me. It made it a lot easier to navigate moving from student to employee, just because most other folks around me had already done so. With professors, it was really nice too. I worked a few like para-prof type positions with them, and I got to explore different areas that I wouldn't normally. One of them encouraged me to do coding, which is something that I actually am now going to use as I do like more STEM art programs. And so having like encouragement just to try new things, and also like basically people organizing my life for me in terms of job applications was really nice. I got really lucky with my like faculty and employer situations. Laurel was my boss at one point.
Yeah, and just like having that like pre-existing knowledge of
Yeah.
people who have been through that sort of process, being able to bounce off ideas and just like express like anxiety and like frustration over like not having everything figured out, and that being a totally normal thing, that was really helpful too.
I'm so glad you both had positive mentorship and faculty support during your time in your institutions. It sounds like that was really positive, which I'm really grateful for both of you. How can LIS programs integrate mental health resources and support systems for students beyond this kind of faculty and mentorship position?
Yes. So one of the things that LIS programs can integrate is mental health support services. So each campus, they do have, health centers available, and I would recommend doing some sort of partnership, or having some sort of program to offer counseling and mental health services to LIS students. Um, and to ensure that they get affordable health care. That way, they have a place to, have support, especially going through this arduous process of getting a MLIS. And the next one is workshops and training, on stress management, time management, and coping strategies. Library schools, like again, and also campuses can partner with other organizations or other businesses to have these workshops and trainings. And recently, I just finished one on psychological safety training, and it was a 6 week program. And I just finished that at my library at Auraria, so that can be also beneficial. And then the last one would be peer support networks. So like library schools, or on the campus as well, can have like groups, like group meetups, like have time, or like socials to foster community and make people feel less isolated taking LIS programs. So that is another way, just to have students interact with each other, because isolation can be a big part, especially if you're taking an online class, or online program. It can be really difficult. So that's why you need those connections.
And just to add on to sort of what Martine said, I would not have gotten through my library program if I did not make such good friends and connect so well with my classmates. I think that these programs would do a really good job if they would encourage students to interact more outside of just class, put a lot of emphasis on clubs or get-togethers, or really anything like that, because when you have somebody else who's going through the same stuff you are, taking your classes, it helps a lot. Kate and Phoebe and Jackie and I all did scripting class together, and it was one of the hardest classes we ever took. And it was incredibly stressful, but we made it through together.
Yeah, absolutely. That discussion, and thank you, Martine, for bringing up the kind of concerns of, I think a lot of students do face a lot of concerns, and what kind of support is available, especially for graduate students, is not always communicated or available. Even within, some really developed programs, even thinking about like online and on-site programming, I know that there's different things available, and I think that's really important to consider for mental health and balance. With that in mind, how can LIS programs address issues of burnout among students before they enter the workplace? Jackie, if you wanted to kind of bring us in on your experience.
Yeah. So, for me personally, I tried to like strategize on my own early last year because I knew I was graduating and wanted to make sure I transitioned into full-time work really quickly. And so I tried to take a lighter course load my last 2 semesters. I worked on cover letters ahead of time, right, to edit and rewrite those. Um, I had like 2.5 jobs and I cut down on that a bit. I tried everything that I could as an individual, and it still wasn't enough. Like it really didn't help at the end of the day, looking back on it. It was still a extremely busy and stressful time, just because of the sheer workload and time that is required to do job applications, right? People often say that it is its own job, and I think it really should be treated like that. Because it just takes so much time. And so I think programs could do, one idea that I had is that programs could actually have a class for doing like creating job materials, like resumes and cover letters, and also like interviewing, right? And so this would be a class specifically meant to train people on how to do job applications and job interviews at a professional level. And I think making this as a credit hour class, even if it's only a couple credit hours, depending on the school and how that all works, I think that's really important because it gives students the time in credit hours to do that work. At the end of the day, graduate students are juggling all kinds of priorities, like we've all mentioned already. And time is one of those things that is very limited. And so if a program can offer credit hour time and credit hours to students, it could really free up space in your week and in your month to do that work. Also having a class is great for, having peers going through the same grind, getting the expertise of instructors. I think there's all kinds of uses for creating a class that's meant to train students in this. And I think that's essentially what the LIS degree is for. It's training. We should treat it as training.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that. Jackie, that's a really good point about the like building in a course for that type of like professional stuff. My program was asynchronous online. I was at Valdosta State. And I remember the first class we took is like the class everyone has to take. And one of the assignments was to build a portfolio. And so you put like your assignments, you talk about like you put your CV on there and stuff. And the next time I, used that portfolio was in my capstone class. And I would have liked to see sort of like that carry out through multiple different classes and different contexts and see how thinking about your professional career would be built into that portfolio. And maybe that looks like kind of what you were describing, Jackie, with like a sort of leaning towards preparing for interviews, for developing sort of application materials. But yeah, I think like the burnout part does come from like working and then balancing, but then also thinking about the future. And it's really hard to think about things that just aren't material and aren't real when you have other material things to deal with. And so I think kind of bringing that to the forefront makes it a little bit more easy to conceptualize like things that haven't happened yet. So yeah, I guess I would have liked to see my portfolio have more bearing on my program.
Absolutely. And that actually leads right into our next question, which is how does the uncertainty of job prospects after graduation affect LIS students' mental health and well-being? And Kate, I'll have you start off with us for that one.
From what I remember, like my last semester of classes, it was like every time I walked onto the campus, everyone was about to cry because of how stressful job applications were. And, even I knew I had a limited like location search I was able to do. And I wasn't in that city yet to do all the like networking, and I had built such a good community in Denver that I was stressed about job applications. I've worked with most of the people on this panel and they can confirm that it was a really hard time. So my mental health was not very good. And because of that, my body was also giving up on itself. Like my back wasn't working. And so I had this perfect storm of like, I need to get a job. I need to move across the country. I, need to also pass my classes, which at the time was not looking promising because I was just late all the time. It was tough. Like, and I watched the same thing happen with all of my peers who weren't already in like pretty secured employment. And because I was in an in-person cohort too, there almost felt like a level of jealousy too that you had to hide when people got jobs too. It was a mess. It was very stressful, but in the end, I think most people were able to come through it on the end, better side. I don't know. It was awful. I'm sure that many people remember this time too.
Yeah, I had a job. I still have that job that I had during most of my library program. But speaking from at the end of my previous master's program, I remember I was in this internship and I think I was about to turn 26. I was about to get kicked out of my parents' healthcare. And I was like, if you don't give me a job, like a full-time job with benefits, I'm leaving right fucking now. Like, I cannot afford to stay here. I cannot afford my rent. I cannot afford healthcare. Like, and I stayed at that job for, again, like 7 years and made very bad money. So was it worth it? I don't know. But I do have a number of friends who have graduated in the last year or two who do not have jobs currently, and they are really, really struggling. The library field is very competitive in Denver. It's probably competitive most places, but I am convinced that there's a library branch here that only stays afloat because there's a MLIS program here, and they can just keep getting getting students in who will take that minimum pay. It is semi-dangerous place. I'm sure y'all in Denver know which place I'm talking about, but it it's it feels very abusive, I guess I would say, that libraries know how desperate people are and will offer absolutely terrible pay, terrible schedules, that kind of thing, because they know that people will take them because that's the option you have. You either take it or you don't pay rent. And even then, you're probably still not really paying rent. So do I have a solution for that? No, not really, because libraries don't really have any money to do better, but relying on, subs who can just sort of fill in for the worst roles of the lowest pay is not really a great solution either. So I don't know. Good luck out there.
You can always move to Texas where I am. We also are in chaos, but it's fun.
Okay.
Yeah, it definitely feels like nothing is going to work out until it does. So, I mean, always keep trying, but yeah, it's uncertain, and I don't know. I think Laurel expressed that well. Like, just hard to imagine getting a job until you do.
There's even like, I know I was really worried about applying to jobs out of state because I did not have the money to move, and I wasn't sure that I'd be able to get money from that future job to move. Like I couldn't guarantee that I would do all that work and then they'd be able to help me move financially. So I think there's lots of different ways that like that can become stressful and become a maze of what you prioritize and how do you know that you're doing the right thing.
And I think that links back to what you were talking about with having a class that can kind of prepare you for that stuff. Like, how do you negotiate moving expenses? Like, when I graduated, which was so long ago, you guys don't even want to know. But I didn't know how to negotiate for moving, like any of that stuff. So, like, being able to let people know, like, this is something that people do and this is how you do it, I think is a really great idea.
Yeah, I know a lot of each other also know each other because of opportunities that were provided because we have a large MLIS program in our state and in our city. Imagining students who are in cities and states that don't have any on-site MLIS programs, if you are going to do an MLIS program, it's only asynchronous or remote, there might not be those built-in opportunities, which I think can be really difficult. There is this kind of understanding that an MLIS gets you through the door, but having job experience is also huge. And that's a really hard thing to balance if you're trying to be a full-time student and also try to find job experience in the free time you have and try to combat, how do I pay for this degree and make sure I'm taking care of myself and have money to pay for this degree and experience. It's a lot at once. So with all that said, how can LIS programs foster a sense of community and belonging to reduce feelings of isolation, potentially amongst students and their communities? And Laura, I'll have you start you off with this one.
Well, I already kind of ranted about this earlier, which is that student clubs are a really, really good way to make friends, connect with people. I think that's sort of a downfall, at least in how DU has presented them, is strictly as professional clubs. And like that is helpful, like joining the ALA student organization can absolutely be great for professional opportunities, but also just like encouraging people to talk to each other in a way that's like not directly related to whatever assignment you have going on in class can really, really help. A lot of students will relocate to wherever for their program and not have friends or family or community in general there. So interacting with your fellow students outside of class can be really, really helpful. Phoebe and I actually were 2 founding members out of 3 for a student organization at DU, which I think has been absorbed by another student organization since then. But like I didn't know Phoebe super well when that started, and we've since become very good friends. So like I would say that was a net positive. But yeah, just honestly getting students to interact outside of class is great. For asynchronous online programs, that's way harder. I met a lot of online students through my work because there were a lot of online students who took graduate assistant positions at the library I work at. And I think that helped a lot because then they were getting to interact with fellow library students, even if they weren't in the same program, getting to interact with, librarians and that kind of thing. Really helpful. But online programs are tough. I've heard a lot of really kind of sad stories about students in online programs that are just like, I don't know anybody. None of my classmates will like work together on this assignment together because we don't communicate really in any way outside of class. Like, I don't know. I almost did an online program and my parents were like, don't you dare. You have to go to an in-person one so you can network. And I got lucky enough that I could do that just because there is a program in the city I live in, but I don't know. I don't really have a good answer for anybody else.
Yeah, my asynchronous program was tough. I mean, luckily I was already working in a public library, and then pretty shortly after starting the program, I got the graduate assistantship at Auraria. And so like already I was embedded with like other people in the same program, even if it was a different school. And then over the course of the 2 years of going to school, I was able to like other people in my public library started going to school. So like there was like that shared community of like we're all kind of in this together, and some of them were doing asynchronous programs as well. Yeah, I think it's hard. I think it has to be intentional, and I think yeah, I don't know, finding people who are into libraries, but in like a not just books are cool, but they're trying to get a job in libraries is the best way to do it. And yeah, I guess yeah, in terms of like finding like that balance of like I have to go do schoolwork, but also I would be nice to do it with people who are in the same boat as me. Yeah, book clubs too. That'd be nice. Wish I had a book club.
Yeah, and I would like to add, because I was part of a asynchronous program as well, through SJSU. And I would say probably like having, interest groups, because I know they provided that like clubs online. There was a virtual reality club, and so they had events, where you meet people through VR, but that can also be the technical challenges of that as well, of getting a headset and stuff like that. And I tried that, and it was cool, but it doesn't really connect as much as in person, when you're with someone face to face and having a relationship. And that's what I would also say is having interest groups in the library. That can be also a great thing to have. Like, hey, like for instance, I facilitate a D&D group at the library, and that's been great. With most of the people here, and it's been great. And then also there's other interest groups at my library currently, like sewing, fiber arts, which we had today. And so I think that can be another route for people to come together from different programs within the library, and then also having that relations with other librarians and library workers. So I think that can be effective as well.
Yeah.
Oh, can I add to
Oh, please,
the
please.
assignment part? Because I also have this frustration with like there's this like the human element of like we're not responsible for each other, or like it doesn't feel that immediate when you have a group assignment and like you not doing enough work or putting in enough work. It doesn't have that impact because you don't feel responsible for each other, and like that part of the community too, I think takes a hit. And like I don't really know how you solve that, but I do want to just uh vocalize that frustration because yeah, it is hard when like you're working with people and like you've never talked to them before. Like maybe you're lucky enough to have worked with them in another class or like have seen their name on a discussion board and like you're like, oh hey, but like beyond that, it's really just like there isn't any sort of connection. And I think Martine is talking about fostering that virtually, which I think is really cool, but it can be really hard to like even notice those opportunities. And like the only interaction you're getting is in these assignments where you're all mad at each other. So yeah, I just wanted to say that.
I think that's actually really interesting because as people, as social animals, like we all need to be in relationship with one another, but for most of our species history, that's been in person, right? Like this virtual thing is very new, and in general we're really bad at it. So it's interesting to think that like we're trying to navigate something that's in a way still very foreign because the internet is in general so new, and even doing a conference like this is, or a panel like this is so new, or doing virtual D&D, all very new territory in the long span of things.
Yeah, I know that at DU, there's sometimes also hybrid classes where there's online and in-person students taking the same class at the same time, which can be an awesome opportunity for working with online students and in-person students to share opportunities and grow community. If not done well, it can be an opportunity for, unfortunately, like isolation, especially for those students who are online. So I do think that understanding that we all have kind of how do we foster community when there might be different time zones or miscommunications or not necessarily communicated opportunities for that connectivity. It seems like it can feel really isolating, and that definitely can take a hit on the mental health. Even if you're in person, if you're in a program that has classes from 7 to 9 p.m., who has energy afterwards to necessarily foster community, especially if you're trying to balance everything else that's going on in life. So, thinking of all of that in the long term, what are the long-term implications of LIS students' mental health struggles on their future careers in librarianship? And I'll have this start off with Jackie.
Yeah. So like in general, I was and am really grateful to have made the jump between grad school and like full-time work so quickly, because I was really worried about that, and that can be a problem for grad students, and that's really tough. But in my head, I was thinking like, if I just get a job, everything's downhill from here, right? Like that was I just need to do this and then I can breathe, right? And that wasn't really the case. I was so overwhelmed and became so stressed and burnt out while I was doing job applications, but I thought it'd be worth it because I'd have this job. But once you're in a new job, especially as a new professional, you not only have the job you're doing, but you're learning how to do that job, right? So in a way, you're still doing that extra work, right? It's extra labor to learn how to do what you are now doing full time. And so in a lot of ways, like starting out from a place of burnout and then trying to acclimate to that level of professionalism is all the more difficult. And so I think sacrificing your mental health in that crunch period while you're ready to graduate does have long-term like impacts on like how well or how quickly you can acclimate to a full-time job. And I actually, not long after graduating, I had a friend who told me that it takes half as long to recover from something like stress and burnout as the time that you were under that stress. So I was in the program for I was in my LIS program for about 2.5 years. And at this point, I'm taking a bit over a year as a sort of rest and recovery year where I am prioritizing rest and I'm telling everybody no. Luckily, Phoebe, I said yes to this before my friend told me this. So I'd already said yes to this one, but I've been allowing myself to not feel guilty about saying no to family and friends, to my ever-growing to-do list. On a professional level, like I've said no to webinars and conferences because this is not my year for doing more. This is my year for rest. And I think prioritizing that is really important to rebuild mental health. And I think it's really important for new professionals who are still doing more than a more seasoned professional who's already learned how to do their job. And so I really think prioritizing rest in a way that you can't when you're in grad school is kind of essential. That's my shtick about the long-term impacts is you gotta rest.
I agree with that, Jackie, because like after my program, I was burnt out, right? I was just like with everything, like I got my degree and I was like, I don't want to do anything with it, keep that away from me. It's kind of like, yeah, because you go through so much, you go through so much stress and anxiety and so much, I guess, in a way, like turmoil or like emotional harm, right? Because you're just trying to keep everything afloat with your life. And yeah, and then afterwards you're just, yeah, completely burnt out. And like even right now, it's been like 6 months, I think, maybe longer than that, maybe 8 months, 9 months since I got my MLIS. I am still burnt out, so that's why I try to keep things at a minimum, and that's what I'm doing right now. And then focusing on like, interest groups, like try to socialize more, do more hobbies, try to do other things that can help me relax and just, yeah, and just, kind of like have a moment of respite, so then that way I could pick myself up again. I'm like, all right, now I will head up to a bigger project. But yeah, so I definitely feel the same way, Jackie. Just like, all right, I just need to relax. Yeah.
I came out of my job, immediately moved, started a new job within like a very short time span in a new city. And I switched from academic libraries into public libraries. So I was already so burnt out from just doing all of that. And I went into working at the largest like central library in all of Texas. And Texas is the largest state. So you can imagine how chaotic it is here. And it, weirdly enough, while that seems like it would be a very stressful like situation, having, I guess my brain works a little differently where now I have this other high stress problem that's not related to me, and I can focus all of my energy into dealing with that every day, where I can put myself on the back burner and allow like my hobbies and my brain to rest. So it's a different version of rest, but it seems to be working. I have, again, like Jackie said, no to a lot of things, especially professional opportunities, just because like I wrote a lot of papers. I talked to a lot of people. I just kind of don't want to do that. It doesn't inspire joy. In my position, I'm allowed to do things that do bring me joy. Like I organized a fiber arts room yesterday, and the other day I went to a book fair and like gave out cards. And, oftentimes we don't have the luxury of saying no to things in our professional jobs that due to whatever reasons. And it's important to find the things you like within a job that you can still say yes to, where you won't get penalized for not doing enough. So figuring out the balance there is really important.
Yeah, to be clear, I am meeting like the minimum service requirements for my job, right? Like as for faculty service and whatnot, but like I'm not going beyond that. I know I have those numbers and I'm not like I'm limiting myself, right? So you have to say yes to some things, of course, but yeah, and I think I'm glad that works the way it does for you, Kate, because it's mostly important to just like find some method that works.
Absolutely. And with that, I just want us to all take a moment. We're going to be transitioning into the question and answer portion. So if anyone participating today has any questions for either the entire panel or anyone individual, please feel free to put those into chat and Christine will be compiling those. But for now, I just want us to all take a minute. This topic can be a lot. So I just would, if you would like, you can take a body or brain scan. Take a moment to decompress, take a breath. I recommend taking a scan of our bodies to see if there's anywhere that you're kind of holding tension right now. And feel free to kind of breathe through that. Again, reminder that this is recorded. So if you need anything, feel free to always, pop back in and view the recordings. Move around, stretch, just maybe, if you can use the restroom, great opportunity. And then after you have taken a nice moment to center yourself and kind of take care of yourself, we will be transitioning into the Q&A. So again, feel free to ask any questions you may have for our panel, our fabulous participants here today. Throw them into chat for us, and we will be answering those in just a second.
Kind of scrolling back in time, I think there was a lot of questions that were answered kind of in the moment, but people were really great sharing things in chat as well, which won't be part of the archive. So there's a couple things I want to point out. The first one was when people were talking about mentors. Obviously, having mentors and support of instructors while you're in the program is huge. But for those of you who work in libraries in Colorado or are attending library school in Colorado, the Colorado Association of Libraries does have a mentoring program that is open to anybody. And you do not have to be a CAL member to participate. And I'll say in the past, we've had great academic mentors and not enough people to match them with. So, but if you're looking to explore different types of libraries. If you're looking, we offer peer and group mentoring as well. So if you're looking for those connections and you're not finding it in your school organization, this might be another alternative. And yes, obviously it would take time to do that. People really resonated with that class, the idea of having a class that was credit bearing for job searching. And somebody else mentioned that it would also be a really great way to reduce some of the systemic inequalities for folks for disadvantaged background, and that it could also help increase the diversity of experiences and background that we see in those who apply for library staff positions. And I thought that was really great. Let's see here. And I believe that we touched on how one can get more community with an asynchronous program. But if you feel that question was not addressed adequately enough, let me know. We shared an idea about book clubs or virtual book clubs that you could perhaps start with your fellow students. A lot of chatter about group projects. And then another a great point was that online programs can also help you feel isolated when you're a distant student, because there might be a lot of information about in-person activities and those kinds of things that you can't attend. A lot of people were kind of really resonating also with the taking time. And from somebody who has worked in libraries for over 30 years, I will say do that, because I jumped into work, and then you're doing all the things, and you're continuing to do all the things, and very much that culture of busyness and not being able to say no. So actually hearing people being very intentional about building in rest, recuperation, capacity, those kinds of things, I support wholeheartedly. Does anybody have any tips for staying busy and motivated during especially busy times such as finals? And this is coming from somebody who's getting ready to write their final paper for the quarter.
Work in a group. Well, not necessarily a group project, but sitting next to somebody in a coffee shop or a library that you know, uh, just like the smallest amount of accountability, at least it wonders for me. uh, if somebody could see that I'm like fucked off and I'm playing games on my phone, then that's a little bit embarrassing. So much more inclined to work on my project if somebody can see when I am not doing that.
Similar to that, I think someone in the chat said body doubling. And if you hate going places to do work, you work better at home. There are a lot of people on YouTube. So I would have like my computer where I'd be writing things, and on my phone, I would have a 4 hours live stream of someone else working. So every time I look, I would still look at the live stream, feel guilty I wasn't looking, and go back to work. And it worked wonders. Could not recommend that enough if you get distracted by people.
That's amazing.
We have another question. How can you help your friends and family understand that you're too busy to do some of the things that you used to do before, or that that your stress is understandable?
I can just talk about this one was really hard for me. I worked 3 jobs. So I worked public library, academic library, and then I bartended, and then I was going to school, which often meant some days I would work all day and work all night, and then get up in the morning and work again. And so, I mean, I think part of it was just like the way I could sell it to my partner was that it's going to end eventually. I'm going to get out, I'm going to graduate, and then I'm ideally going to have 1 job. I have 2 jobs now, so it's better than 3. But yeah, I think like it's temporary, I guess. And I was really stressed a lot. I tried to hide it from my coworkers and stuff, but it was really hard to like go all day working and then I have to write a paper about something. And um so yeah, I guess just communicating that it's like it will end, hopefully.
I think being honest about like how stressed you are can be useful for friends or family to like have them see things from your perspective. You know, like like a level of honesty can of just like, look, I've got these 2 papers and I have like work the next 3 days, you know, maybe I can do something this weekend, but like I don't know if I'll be too tired. And just sort of being honest. I imagine you're asking this question because people are not like taking that at face value and working with you on that. Maybe giving alternatives of like things that are less, that would take less energy. So if they want to like go out to a club, you can be like, well, what if we just go watch a movie at my house, right? You come to me and then I'll provide the popcorn, right? And so it's like less work on you. So maybe alternatives like that can be helpful. But at the end of the day, being able to just say like, I don't have the capacity to do this right now. Like, can we push this off? I think especially friends should be good about that, or else they're probably not great friends at the end of the day. And family has to deal with you no matter what. So they can just be told, no, it's okay.
Yeah, I also prioritized like trips. So I wouldn't really do much like throughout the week, but we would plan like let's go camping or like let's like intentionally make a whole like weekend about like doing something that we normally wouldn't, as opposed to like going out to see a movie or, you know, doing something with friends. Like that's fun to do, but like it can also be exhausting. And I think like having like periods of time where you're planning for something a little bit more fun or a little different, and then that kind of like soothes over the parts where you're actually not able to do things that are more fun with your friends and family.
I would recommend not doing what I did, which is just to not respond to anybody's texts for like a week at a time. And then my parents called me to see if I was still alive. As tempting as that is, somebody will call you and it will become much more of a thing than it really needs to be. So just keep that in mind. But I also definitely agree with like, I don't know, that it's temporary. It will be done eventually. I would always sort of make plans like this is a 10-week semester. I have 4 more weeks left. We will do things that weekend. The class is done. We can do whatever. It'll be great. It'll be so much fun. Or just sort of putting more planning into sort of bigger things. Like I went to Japan for 2 weeks during finals, during one of the semesters. And I don't necessarily recommend that, but sort of having like something like putting concentrating the social activities into sort of bigger things instead of spreading them out, I think is a pretty good compromise for a lot of people. Just don't ignore your phone for weeks at a time.
I really liked the method of I would keep everything in a Google Calendar, and if someone was really being like, we need to hang out, we need to hang out, we need to hang out, I would send them a screenshot of my Google Calendar and be like, okay, you find a time in here that works for you. If you can't, then we have to push it up to like another week or another month because you can see I'm slammed. And that would work especially on my parents, so it would work.
We're getting a lot of great comments and things in the chat, but we've got one final question that I think is really great to wrap up with. And this is from someone who is a new adjunct faculty at an MLIS program at DU. In hindsight, if you could tell your LIS professors something, not ask them a question, but tell them something you wanted them to know, what would that be?
The jobs ain't there. That sounds really mean, but I can guarantee all of us on this panel have experienced this. The jobs aren't there. And the things that the jobs do want are experiences and years of work that we don't have and we're just not going to have. And a lot of people coming into the library program are not people who have worked in libraries before. I certainly wasn't. And the program alone is not enough. It probably hasn't been enough for a decade. The jobs aren't there. We did a class, I think my first or second semester, where we were supposed to like look at jobs and see what the requirements were, and it was an honestly embarrassing experience for everybody involved. And the only jobs that I was really finding were fascinatingly in Colorado City, which is an FLDS town. So it was like kind of like this, like we're trying to lure women to work in this town so that we can increase your pop. It was weird. So that's the jobs aren't there.
There's a comment in chat directed to this question. Please implement universal design for learning principles when developing your course materials, and really think about accessibility for all students from the beginning. It's really frustrating as a disabled student to have courses that are incredibly heavy or just the readings, because disability makes reading and information processing take significantly longer. And I would agree with that.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. I would tell one of my professors that, especially because I was in an online program, that the way that you're creating these classes is not engaging. It's cut, like copy and paste discussion posts and then assignment, and like I'm not getting engagement out of that. Like, I'm doing it and it's exhausting because we are putting in, like, I'll put in a bunch of work to a post, and then after the first week I see everyone else's posts, and then we all collectively decide without talking to each other, we're going to put as little effort as possible into these posts. So, like, and that's a sign that we are not engaging with each other, and there needs to be different ways to, and like, what's the point of the online program if we're all doing the same thing and it doesn't work? Because I would agree with Laurel that, like, these programs are not preparing us well for library work, and I do think that actual library work is the most important preparation, and then people hiring for you or for positions also think that. So, like, we need to find different ways to engage in the work, and like the discussion post format that I had in my program was not good enough. And then the, like, occasional group projects did not kind of supplement that.
I kind of want to echo what everyone said, including the commenter, the commenter in chat. Specifically with like asynchronous discussion posts, those are the worst. Like even you know, a Zoom class like this where we're talking is better than just a discussion post as far as engagement. So yeah, I definitely would agree with you there, Josh. I think I would tell most of my instructors about my favorite instructor in my program. It was actually an archives class, but this instructor basically said, I have a syllabus and there are deadlines for all these papers or projects, whatever we were doing, depending on the week. And they are all guidelines. You do not have to turn them in on this day. You do not have to ask me for an extension if you need one, right? But if you do not keep yourself on track for any of this and you don't have stuff turned into me by, you know, the date they gave us, however many days before grading had to be due, which they were definitely giving us you know, a lot of leeway to ruin their life at the very end of the quarter. But if you do not like turn in these papers, you're getting a 0 by the last day to get grading done in the quarter. You're just straight up, I'm not gonna, like, zeros on all those projects. And that was really useful because if I could turn in a paper early, like a day early, I would. If I had a problem, like an emergency with my dog, which did happen, I knew I didn't need to communicate with that instructor and I could just turn it in 2 days late. If I had to make the choice between staying up till 2 a.m. to edit something versus like being able to do it after work the next day, I could. And so it gave us as students in that class a lot of responsibility and like some agency over how we did that work. And when we were able to fit it into our schedules. And I think that was one of the best classes I took because of all that agency that we had.
And also, I would like to add quick is that with my experience, if I was going to tell one of my professors, right? And it was like a cataloging course. And basically, the whole course was just like showing metadata in the Mark 21 system. And that was it. And it was like, here you go. Here's PDF files of different, cataloging. And it's like there was no hands-on experience, right? If it wasn't for me working at a library at the time I was taking my MLIS, I would have no clue what was going on. And I think we, like as a profession and as, to treat our students more of like a apprenticeship, like, hey, go to a library. And yes, we do have internships, but we should have more hands-on experience, especially for online students, because like I did it, and also I did a metadata class, right? And I was doing premise, I was doing XML, I was doing RDF, and it was all written out. It was not programmed at all. So I had to type out everything in code. And like, how is this applicable when you don't have no reference to the system or to a ILS, right? Or to, other, software if you're just, writing it out. So that's what I would say, more hands-on, more personal experience at a library. Yeah.
So I believe that we have addressed all of the questions in chat. If not, let me know if I've missed something. And I know we have gone a couple minutes over today's session, but felt like we kind of needed to, especially to get to that last question. Once again, we did record this session, and I hope to have the archives sent out to everybody by tomorrow. I want to thank all participants, especially for being so engaged in the chat. I think being able to kind of share your experiences as the panelists were talking, hopefully was a little bit cathartic as well. And knowing that you're not alone, that you have experienced, I mean, like I said, I'm getting flashbacks to my 20 years ago. So a little sad that the same stuff is happening. But here we are. At least we're talking about it now. And then lastly, I really want to thank all of our panelists for agreeing to be with us here today, to share, for saying yes to this one project, as they're also trying to rest from their recent graduations. I will be also sending an anonymous survey where you can share your thoughts about today's panel. And then I will also let you know how you can get a certificate for attendance for today's session. All of that will be in the email that I send out to people by probably mid-morning tomorrow. So once again, last thanks to the panelists for agreeing to do this with us today. And we see some celebrations coming through. And I really appreciate everybody taking the time. Thanks for joining us today.